Hey everybody, welcome back to Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire with Biblio-Bibbly. Last
time we met all of Harry and Ron's teachers for the year, which includes Hagrid, Sprout, the divination teacher, Trelawney, thank you. I just call her the divination teacher. And we didn't go to his class yet, but we met Mad-Eye Moody.
Yeah.
Who is one of my favorite characters so far in this book. For the simple fact, he turned Draco into a ferret. And then proceeded to abuse him.
Yes. That's I guess the best way to put it. Yes, he abused him.
Mm-hmm. You know, could Mad-Eye Moody get 2 charges for that? Be animal abuse and child abuse.
Ooh. Yeah. I don't think animal abuse is like a thing they worry about.
No.
People abuse, though, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe not.
I don't know. No one seems to really mind that Harry gets abused by the Dursleys every summer.
I was gonna say, and that's straight up in the Muggle world. That's not even like wizarding. That's not against... I don't get it. I mean, I could talk about it a while, because I know I've brought it up a lot in the beginning of books, and that's why I haven't brought it back up.
I feel like you'll understand by the end of this series better.
Why the Dursleys get away with what they do.
Mm-hmm. I think you'll understand better why, like, no one is just like, hey, no, you're not living here anymore because they abuse you. Like, I think you'll get it.
What possible reason? There's no reason.
There is, though. Just drop it. Just drop it. I can't. Let's not go there.
Okay. Well, let's get started then.
Chapter 14. The Unforgivable Curses. The next 2 days passed without great incident, unless you counted Neville melting his 6 cauldron and potions. Professor Snape, who seemed to have attained new levels of vindictiveness over the summer, gave Neville detention, and Neville returned from it in a state of nervous collapse, having been made to disembowel a barrelful of horned toads. "You know why Snape's in such a foul mood, don't you?" said Ron to Harry, as they watched Hermione teaching Neville a scouring charm to remove the toad guts from under his fingernails. "Yeah," said Harry. "Moody." It was common knowledge that Snape really wanted the dark arts job, and he had now failed to get it for the 4th year running. Snape had disliked all of their previous dark arts teachers, and shown it, but he seemed strangely wary of displaying overt animosity to Mad-Eye Moody. Indeed, when Harry ever saw the two of them together at mealtimes, or when they passed in the corridors, he had the distinct impression that Snape was avoiding Moody's eye, whether magical or normal. "I reckon Snape's a bit scared of him, you know," Harry said thoughtfully. "Imagine if Moody turned Snape into a horned toad," said Ron, his eyes misting over, "and bounced him all over his dungeon." The Gryffindor 4th years were looking forward to Moody's first lesson so much that they arrived early after lunch on Thursday and queued up outside his classroom before the bell even rang. The only person missing was Hermione, who turned up just in time for the lesson. "Been in the library," Harry finished her sentence for her. "Come on, or we won't get decent seats." They hurried into the 3 chairs right in front of the teacher's desk, took out their copies of The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, and waited, unusually quiet. Soon they heard Moody's distinctive clunking footsteps coming down the corridor, and he entered the room, looking as strange and frightening as ever. They could just see his clawed wooden foot protruding from beneath his robes. "You can put those away," he grumbled, stumping over to his desk and sitting down. "Those books. You won't need them." They returned the books to their bags, Ron looking excited. Moody took out a register, shook his long mane of grizzled grey hair out of his twisted and scarred face, and began to call out names, his normal eye moving steadily down the list, while his magical eye swiveled around, fixing upon each student as he or she answered. "Right then," he said, when the last person had declared themselves present. I've had a letter from Professor Lupin about this class. Seems you've had a pretty thorough grounding in tackling dark creatures. You've covered boggarts, redcaps, hinky punks, grindylows, kappas, and werewolves. Is that right? There was a general murmur of assent. But you're behind, very behind, on dealing with curses, said Moody. So I'm here to bring you up to scratch on what wizards can do to each other. I've got 1 year how to teach you to deal with dark... What? Aren't you staying? Ron blurted out. Moody's magical eye spun around to stare at Ron looking extremely apprehensive, but after a moment Moody smiled, the first time he'd seen him do so. The effect was to make his heavily scarred face look more twisted and contorted than ever. It was nevertheless a relief to know that he ever did anything as friendly as smile. Ron looked deeply relieved. "You'll be Arthur Weasley's son, eh?" said Moody. "Your father got me out of a very tight corner a few days ago. Yeah, I'm staying just 1 year. Special favour to Dumbledore. 1 year, and then back to my quiet retirement." He gave a harsh laugh, and then clapped his gnarled hands together. "So, straight to it. Curses. They come in many strengths and forms. Now, according to the Ministry of Magic, I'm supposed to teach you counter curses and leave it at that. I'm not supposed to show you what illegal dark curses look like until you're in your 6th year. But you're supposed to be old enough to deal with it till then. But Professor Dumbledore's got a higher opinion of your nerves. He reckons you can cope, and I say the sooner you know what you're up against, the better. How are you supposed to defend yourselves against something you've never seen? A wizard who's about to put an illegal curse on you isn't going to tell you what he's about to do. He's not going to do it nice and polite to your face. You need to be prepared. You need to be alert and watchful. You need to put that away, Miss Brown, when I'm talking." Lavender jumped and blushed. She'd been showing Parvati her completed horoscope under the desk. Apparently Moody's magical eye could see through solid wood, as well as the back of his head. "So, do any of you know which curses are most heavily punished by wizarding law?" Several hands rose tentatively into the air, including Ron and Hermione's. Moody pointed at Ron, though his magical eye was still fixed on Lavender. Said Ron tentatively. "My dad told me about one. Is it called the Imperious Curse or something?" "Ah, yes," said Moody appreciatively. "Your father would know about that one. Gave the Ministry a lot of trouble at one time, the Imperious Curse." Moody got heavily to his mismatched feet, opened his desk drawer and took out a glass jar. 3 large black spiders were scuttling around inside it. Harry felt Ron recoil slightly next to him. Ron hated spiders. Moody reached into the jar, caught one of the spiders, and held it in the palm of his hand so that they could all see it. He then pointed his wand at it and muttered, "Imperio." The spider leapt from Moody's hand on a fine silk of thread and began to swing back and forward as though on a trapeze. It stretched out its legs rigidly, then did a backflip, breaking the thread and landing on the desk, where it began to cartwheel in circles. Moody jerked his wand, and the spider rose onto 2 of its hind legs and went to what was unmistakably a tap dance. Everyone was laughing except for Moody. "Think it's funny, do you?" he growled. "You'd like it, would you, if I did it to you?" The laughter died away almost instantly. "Total control," said Moody quietly, as the spider balled itself up and began to roll over and over. "I could make it jump out the window, drown itself, throw itself down one of your throats." Ron gave an involuntary shudder. "Years back there were a lot of witches and wizards being controlled by the Imperious Curse," said Moody, and Harry knew he was talking about the days in which Voldemort had been all-powerful. "Some job for the Ministry, trying to sort out who was being forced to act and who was acting of their own free will. The Imperious Curse can be fought, and I'll be teaching you how, but it takes real strength of character, and not everyone's got it. Better to be avoid being hit with it if you can. Constant vigilance!" He barked, and everyone jumped. Moody picked up the somersaulting spider and threw it back into the jar. "Anyone else know one? Another illegal curse?" Hermione's hand flew into the air again, and so, to Harry's slight surprise, did Neville's. The only class in which Neville usually volunteered information was herbology, which was easily his best subject. Neville looked surprised at his own daring. "Yes," said Moody, his magical eye rolling over to fix on Neville. There's one. The Cruciatus Curse," said Neville in a small but distinct voice. Moody was looking very intently at Neville, this time with both eyes. "Your name's Longbottom?" he said, his magical eye swooping down to check the register again. Neville nodded nervously, but Moody made no further inquiries. Turning back to the class at large, he reached into the jar for the next spider and placed it on the desktop, where it remained motionless, apparently too scared to move. "The Cruciatus curse," said Moody, "needs to be a bit bigger for you to get the idea," he said, and pointed his wand at the spider. "Engorgio!" The spider swelled. It was now larger than a tarantula. Abandoning all pretense, Ron pushed his chair backwards as far away from Moody's desk as possible. Moody raised his wand again, pointed it at the spider, and muttered, "Crucio!" At once the spider's legs bent in upon its body, it rolled over and began to twitch horribly, rocking from side to side. No sound came from it, but Harry was quite sure if it could have been given voice, it would have been screaming. Moody did not remove his wand, and the spider began to jerk and shudder more violently. "Stop it!" Hermione said shrilly. Harry looked round at her. She was looking not at the spider, but at Neville, and Harry, following her gaze, saw that Neville's hands were clenched upon the desk in front of him, his knuckles white, his eyes wide and horrified. Moody raised his wand. The spider's legs relaxed, but it continued to twitch. "Reducio," Moody muttered, and the spider shrank back to its proper size. He put it back into the jar. "Pain," said Moody softly. "You don't need thumbscrews or knives to torture someone if you can perform the Cruciatus curse. That one was very popular once." "Right. Anyone know any others?" Harry looked round. From the looks on everyone's faces, he guessed that they were all wondering what was going to happen to the last spider. Hermione's hand shook slightly as, for the third time, she raised it into the air. "Yes," said Moody, looking at her. "Avada Kedavra," Hermione whispered. Several people looked uneasily around at her, including Ron. "Ah," said Moody, another slight smile twisting his lopsided mouth. "Yes, the last and worse. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse." He put his hand into the glass jar, and almost as though it knew what was coming, the third spider scuttled frantically around the bottom of the jar, trying to evade Moody's fingers, but he trapped it and placed it upon the desktop. It started to scuttle frantically across the wooden surface. Moody raised his wand, and Harry felt a sudden thrill of foreboding. "Avada Kedavra!" Moody roared. There was a flash of blinding green light, and a rushing sound, as though a vast invisible something was soaring through the air. Instantaneously the spider rolled over onto its back, unmarked but unmistakably dead. Several of the girls stifled cries. Ron had thrown himself backwards and almost toppled off of his seat as the spider skidded toward him. Moody swept the dead spider off the desk and onto the floor. "Not nice," he said calmly. "Not pleasant. And there's no counter-curse. There's no blocking it. Only one person has ever survived it, and he's sitting right in front of me." Harry felt his face redden as Moody's eyes, both of them, looked into his own. He could feel everyone else looking at him too. Harry stared at the blank blackboard as though fascinated by it, but not really seeing anything at all. So that was how his parents had died. Exactly like the spider. Had they been unblemished and unmarked too? Had they simply seen the flash of green light and heard the rush of speeding death before life was wiped from their bodies? Harry had been picturing his parents' death over and over for 3 years now, ever since he found out that they had been murdered. Ever since he found out that what had happened that night. How Wormtail had betrayed his parents' whereabouts to Voldemort, who had come to find them at their cottage. How Voldemort had killed Harry's father first. How James Potter had tried to hold him off while he shouted at his wife to take Harry and run. And Voldemort had advanced on Lily Potter, told her to move aside so that he could kill Harry. How she had begged him to kill her instead, refused to stop shielding her son. And so Voldemort had murdered too before turning his wand on Harry. Harry knew these details because he had heard his parents' voices when he had fought the Dementors last year, for that was the terrible power of the Dementors, to force their victim to relive their worst memories of their life, and drown, powerless in their own despair. Moody was speaking again from a great distance, it seemed to Harry. With a massive effort he pulled himself back to the present and listened to what Moody was saying. "Avada Kedavra is a curse that needs a powerful bit of magic behind it. You could all get your wands out now and point them at me and say the words, but I doubt I'd get so much as a nosebleed. But that doesn't matter. I'm not teaching you how to do it. Now there's no counter-curse. Why am I showing you? Because you've got to know. You've got to appreciate what the worst is. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're facing it. Constant vigilance!" he roared, and the whole class jumped again. "Now, those 3 curses, Avada Kedavra, Imperius, and Cruciatus. They are known as the Unforgivable curses. The use of any of them on a fellow human being is enough to earn a life sentence in Azkaban. That's what you're up against. That's what I've got to teach you to fight. You need preparing. You need arming. But most of all, you need to practice constant, never-ceasing vigilance. Get out your quills. Copy this down. They spent the rest of the lesson taking notes on each of the unforgivable curses. No one spoke until the bell rang, but when Moody had dismissed them and they had left the classroom, a torrent of talk burst forth. Most people were discussing the curses in an awed voice. Did you see it twitch? And when he killed it, just like that. They were talking about the lesson, Harry thought, as though it had been some sort of spectacular show, but he hadn't found it entertaining, and nor, it seemed, had Hermione. Shut up, she said tensely to Harry and Ron. Not the ruddy library again, said Ron. No, said Hermione curtly, pointing up a side passage. Neville. Neville was standing alone, halfway up the passage, staring at the stone wall opposite him, with the same horrified, wide-eyed look he'd worn when Moody had demonstrated the Cruciatus curse. Neville? Hermione said gently. Neville looked round. Oh, hello, he said, his voice much higher than usual. Interesting lesson, wasn't it? I wonder what's for dinner. I'm starving, aren't you? Neville, are you all right? Said Hermione. Oh, yeah, I'm fine, Neville gabbled in the same unnaturally high voice. Very interesting dinner. I mean lesson. What's for eating? Ron gave Harry a startled look. Neville, what? But an odd clunking sounded behind them, and they turned to see Professor Moody limping toward them. All four of them fell silent, watching him apprehensively, but when he spoke it was in a much lower and gentler growl than they'd heard yet. It's all right, Sonny, he said to Neville. Why don't you come up to my office? Come on, we can have a cup of tea. Neville looked more frightened at the prospect of tea with Moody. He neither moved nor spoke. Moody turned his magical eye upon Harry. You're all right, are you, Potter? Yes, said Harry most defiantly. Moody's blue eye quivered slightly in its socket as it surveyed Harry. Then he said, You've got to know. It seems harsh, maybe, but you've got to know. No point pretending. Well, come on, Longbottom, I've got some books that might interest you. Neville looked pleadingly at Harry, Ron and Hermione, but they didn't say anything, so Neville had no choice but to allow himself to be steered away, one of Moody's gnarled hands on his shoulder. What was that about? Said Ron, watching Neville and Moody turn the corner. I don't know, said Hermione, looking pensive. Some lesson, though, eh? Said Ron to Harry as they set off for the Great Hall. Fred and George were right, weren't they? He really knows his stuff, Moody, doesn't it? When he did Avada Kedavra, that spider just died, just snuffed it right out. But Ron fell suddenly silent at the look on Harry's face and didn't speak again until they reached the Great Hall, when he said he'd supposed they better make a start on Professor Trelawney's predictions tonight, as they would take ours. Hermione did not join in with Harry and Ron's conversation during dinner, but ate furiously fast and then left for the library again. Harry and Ron walked down to Gryffindor Tower, and Harry, who'd been thinking of nothing else all through dinner, now raised the subject of the unforgivable curses himself. Wouldn't Moody and Dumbledore be in trouble with the Ministry if they knew we'd seen the curses? Harry asked as she approached the fat lady. Yeah, probably, said Ron. But Dumbledore's always done things his way, hasn't he? And Moody's been getting in trouble for years, I reckon. Attacks first and asks questions later. Look at his dustbins. Balderdash. The fat lady swung forward to reveal the entrance hall, and they climbed into the Gryffindor common room, which was crowded and noisy. Shall we get our divination stuff, then? Said Harry. I suppose, Ron groaned. They went up to the dormitory to fetch their books and charts, and found Neville there, sitting on his bed, reading. He looked a good deal calmer than at the end of Moody's lesson, though still not entirely normal. His eyes were rather red. You all right, Neville? Harry asked him. Oh, yeah, said Neville. I'm fine, thanks. Just reading this book Professor Moody lent me. He held up the book. Magical Mediterranean Water Plants and Their Properties. Apparently Professor Sprout told Professor Moody I'm really good at herbology, Neville said. There was a faint note of pride in his voice that Harry had rarely heard before. He thought I'd like this. Telling Neville what Professor Sprout had said, Harry thought, had been a very tactful way of cheering Neville up, for Neville very rarely heard that he was good at anything. It was the sort of thing Professor Lupin would have done. Harry and Ron took their copies of Unfogging the Future back down to the common room, found a table and set to work on their predictions for the coming month. An hour later they had made very little progress, though their table was littered with bits of parchment bearing sums and symbols, and Harry's brain was as fogged as though it had been filled with the fumes from Professor Trelawney's fire. I haven't got a clue what this lot's supposed to mean, he said, staring down at a long list of calculations. You know, said Ron, whose hair was going on end because of all the times he'd run his fingers through it in frustration, I think it's back to the old divination standby. What, make it up? Yeah, said Ron, sweeping his jumble of scrawled-off notes off the table, dipping his pen into some ink, and starting to write. Next Monday, he said as he scribbled, I'm likely to develop a cough owing to the unlucky conjunction of Mars and Jupiter, he said. He looked up at Harry. You know her, just put in loads of misery. She'll lap it up. Right, said Harry, crumpling up his first attempt and lobbing it over the heads of a group of chattering first years into the fire. Okay, on Monday I will be in danger of, burns. Yeah, you will be, said Ron darkly. We're seeing the Scroots again on Monday. Okay, Tuesday I'll, lose a treasured possession, said Harry, who was flicking through Unfogging the Future for ideas. Good one, said Ron, copying it down. Because of, Mercury. Why don't you get stabbed in the back by someone you thought was a friend? Yeah, cool, said Harry, scribbling it down. Because Venus is in the 12th house. And on Wednesday I'll think I'll come off the worst in a fight. Ah, I was going to have a fight. Okay, I'll lose a bet. Yeah, you were betting I'd win my fight. They continued to make up predictions, which grew steadily more tragic, for another hour, while the common room around them slowly emptied as people went to bed. Crookshanks wandered over toward them, leapt lightly into an empty chair, and stared inscrutably at Harry, rather as Hermione might look if she knew that they weren't doing their homework properly. Staring around the room, trying to think of a misfortune they hadn't used yet, Harry saw Fred and George sitting together against the opposite wall, heads together, quills out, poring over a single piece of parchment. It was most unusual to see Fred and George hidden away in a corner and working silently. They usually liked to be in the thick of things and the noisy centre of attention. There was something secretive about the way they were working on the piece of parchment, and Harry was reminded of how they sat together writing something back at the Burrow. He had thought that it was another order form for Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, but it didn't look like that this time. If it had been, they surely would have let Lee Jordan in on the joke. He wondered whether it had anything to do with entering the Tri-Wizard tournament. As Harry watched, George shook his head at Fred, scratched something out with his quill, and said in a very quiet voice that nevertheless carried across the almost deserted common room, No, that sounds like we're accusing him. Got to be careful. Then George looked over and saw Harry watching him. Harry grinned and quickly returned to his predictions. He didn't want George to think he was eavesdropping. Shortly after that, the twins rolled up their parchment, said good night, and went off to bed. Fred and George had been gone 10 minutes or so when the portrait hole opened and Hermione climbed into the common room, carrying a sheaf of parchment in one hand and a box whose contents rattled as she walked in the other. Crookshanks arched his back, purring. "Hello," she said. "I've just finished." "So have I," said Ron triumphantly, throwing down his quill. Hermione sat down, laid the things she was carrying in an empty armchair, and pulled Ron's predictions toward her. "Not going to have a very good month, are you?" she said sardonically, as Crookshanks curled up in her lap. "Ah, well, at least I'm forewarned," Ron yelled. "You seem to be drowning twice," said Hermione. "Oh, am I?" Ron peered down at his predictions. "I better change one of them to getting trampled by a rampaging hippogriff." "Don't you think it's a bit obvious you've made these up?" said Hermione. "How dare you!" said Ron in mock outrage. "We've been working like house elves here." Hermione raised her eyebrows. "It's just an expression," said Ron hastily. Harry laid down his quill too, having just finished predicting his own death by decapitation. "What's in the box?" he asked, pointing at it. "Funny you should ask," said Hermione with a nasty look at Ron. She took off the lid and showed them the contents. Inside were about 50 badges, all of them different colours, but all bearing the same letters. S-P-E-W. "Spew," said Harry, taking up a badge and looking at it. "What's this about?" "Not spew," said Hermione impatiently. "It's S-P-E-W. It stands for the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare." "Never heard of it," said Ron. "Well, of course you haven't," said Hermione. "I've only just started it." "Yeah," said Ron in mild surprise. "How many members have you got?" "Well, if you two join, 3, said Hermione. "And you think we want to walk around wearing badges that say spew, do you?" said Ron. "S-P-E-W, said Hermione hotly. "I was going to put stop the outrageous abuse of our fellow magical creatures and campaign for a change in their legal status, but it wouldn't fit, so this is the heading of our manifesto." She brandished the sheaf of parchment at them. "I've been researching it thoroughly in the library. Elf enslavement goes back centuries. I can't believe no one's done anything about it before now." "Hermione, open your ears," said Ron loudly. "They like it. They like being enslaved. Our short-term aims, said Hermione, speaking more loudly than Ron, and acting as though she hadn't heard a word, are to secure house elves fair wages and working conditions. Our long-term aims include changing the law about non-wand use and trying to get an elf into the Department of Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, because they're shockingly underrepresented. And how do we do all this? Harry asked. We start by recruiting members, said Hermione happily. I thought 2 sickles to join. That buys a badge, and the proceeds can fund our leaflet campaign. You're treasurer, Ron. I've got you a collecting tin upstairs, and Harry, you're secretary, so you might want to write down everything I'm saying now as a record for the first meeting that we're having. There was a pause in which Hermione beamed at the pair of them, and Harry sat, torn between exasperation at Hermione and amusement at the look on Ron's face. The silence was broken not by Ron, who in any case looked as though he was temporarily dumbstruck, by a soft tap-tap on the window. Harry looked across the now empty common room and saw, illuminated by the moonlight, a snowy owl perched on the window-sill. "Hedwig!" he shouted, and he launched himself out of his armchair and across the room to pull open the window. Hedwig flew inside, soared across the room, and landed on the table on top of Harry's predictions. "About time!" said Harry, hurrying after her. "She's got an answer!" said Ron excitedly, pointing at the grubby piece of parchment tied to Hedwig's leg. Harry hastily untied it and sat down to read it, whereupon Hedwig fluttered onto his knee, hooting softly. "What does it say?" Hermione asked breathlessly. The letter was very short and looked as though it had been scrawled in a great hurry. Harry read it aloud. "Harry, I'm flying north immediately. This news about your scar is the latest in a series of strange rumours that have reached me here. If it hurts again, go straight to Dumbledore. They're saying he's got Mad-Eye out of retirement, which means he's reading the signs, even if no one else is. I'll be in touch soon. My best to Ron and Hermione. Keep your eyes open, Harry. Sirius." Harry looked at Ron and Hermione, who stared back at him. "He's flying north," Hermione whispered. "He's coming back." "Dumbledore's reading what signs?" said Ron, looking perplexed. "Harry, what's up?" For Harry had just hit himself in the forehead with his fist, jolting Hedwig out of his lap. "I shouldn't have told him," Harry said furiously. "What are you on about?" said Ron in surprise. "It's made him think he's got to come back," said Harry, now slamming his fist on the table so that Hedwig landed on the back of Ron's chair, hooting indignantly. "Coming back because he thinks I'm in trouble, and there's nothing wrong with me, and I haven't got anything for you." Harry snapped at Hedwig, who was clicking her beak expectantly. "You'll have to go up to the Owlery if you want food." Hedwig gave him an extremely offended look and took off for the open window, cuffing him round the head with her outstretched wings as she went. "Harry," Hermione began in a pacifying sort of voice. "I'm going to bed," Harry said shortly. "See you in the morning." Upstairs in the dormitory he pulled on his pyjamas and got into his four-poster, but didn't feel remotely tired. If Sirius came back and got caught, it would be Harry's fault. Why had he just kept his mouth shut? A few seconds' pain and he'd had to blab. It was just if he just had the sense to keep it to himself. He heard Ron come up to the dormitory a short while later, but he didn't speak to him. For a long time Harry lay staring up at the dark canopy of his bed. The dormitory was completely silent, and had he been less preoccupied, Harry would have realized that the absence of Neville's usual snores meant that he was not the only one lying awake.
Sirius coming back. Apparently something, well, no pun intended, serious is happening.
He's a little worried about things.
And apparently Dumbledore is too. That's why they brought Mad-Eye Moody in. So Voldemort is on his way.
Strange things are afoot.
Strange things are definitely afoot. Boy, I guess Percy's
Cauldron essay?
Was it an essay?
Or report?
I guess Percy's Cauldron report didn't go too well because Neville's melting through cauldrons left and right. What wouldn't happen if they were a little bit thicker, you know?
I think it's because Neville is really...
Absolutely not. It is 100% the cauldrons.
I think it's Neville.
Percy needs to put this in his report.
Well, no one else melted their cauldrons, just Neville.
He got the bad ones.
Also, Snape really makes him so nervous.
I know.
So he probably is, screwing up. Left and right.
On the topic of Neville, glad he got some praise.
Right? Yeah,
I feel like every book is always... The only time Neville's mentioned is... So this horrible action just happened to Neville.
He was really, really upset over the Cruciatus curse.
Yeah.
It really bothered him.
At first I thought, does it, like, affect him or something?
No.
No? Okay. Why? I don't know why it affected him so much. I mean, yeah, the poor spider. I get it, but didn't he, like, take the curse off Mad-Eye Moody?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I know why it affected Neville.
Well, I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
But I do not.
No, you do not. But yes, isn't it nice that Neville got a little something?
Yeah.
He's a herbology whiz.
Mm-hmm. He is. He knows about his plants. And once again, only 1 year for a good dark arts teacher.
Yeah, but at least this time you know right out the gate.
Well, yes, that fair enough. He's choosing to leave. There isn't necessarily anything wrong with him, other than he's a little eccentric.
Yeah, he's
A little bit crazy.
I think he probably has a little bit a lot of PTSD.
Yeah. I mean, your whole job is to fight dark wizards. Like, I'm sure he's seen some stuff.
I mean, yeah. Those 3 curses are pretty awful.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
I mean, you've got one that you can use to torture people.
Yeah. Just puts them in extreme pain.
Another one to
Control them.
control what they do. And then the other one to just commit murder.
Yeah, just kill them straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, at least we know what the curse is now.
Yeah.
I was asking about that.
You finally know what killed Harry's
Mm-hmm.
parents. Mm-hmm.
And even Harry knows. That's got to be some PTSD for Harry.
I think Harry straight up has PTSD already.
Well, yeah.
I mean, in the third... Was it no, in the second book, in the summertime, he keeps waking up in a cold sweat because he has nightmares about Voldemort.
Yeah.
Like, Harry has PTSD.
Oh, no doubt. Especially after the Dementors made him, like, relive that moment.
Yeah.
You know, at least before the Dementors, he really didn't know what happened.
Now he knows.
Now he, like, watched it.
Yeah, kind of. Now he knows, like, Voldemort came in and killed my parents.
Yeah. On a happier note, Hermione's making steps to free the house elves.
Oh my god, she's so...
Spew.
It's SPW! Ron is just like, Hermione, really?
I love how she already, like, obligated their jobs.
Yeah, she didn't even ask him.
Yeah.
She didn't even say, like, hey...
Ron, you're treasurer. Harry, you're secretary. So everything I just said, write it down.
Right. It's 2 sickles for a badge. This, that, and the other. We want to get them wages. That's the first step. Spew.
Get Dobby up there on the committee.
Dobby. Oh, spew. Oh, spew. Hermione. So now you know what she's been doing in the library.
Yep. Been researching. I mean, last book, she did research a lot of animal and wizard legal
for
jargon.
Buckbeak's
Buckbeak.
case. Yeah.
Yeah, she went through a lot of legal processes to figure out what's going on with him. I could definitely see Hermione after Hogwarts becoming like some wizard lawyer.
Right. If they have those.
I feel like they got to.
Some kind of litigator, some kind of magical law enforcement, something.
How do they, or don't they have, like, a jurisdiction system? Is it just, no, you were bad, you're going to Azkaban?
You'll find out.
Okay. I mean, they have a committee for the I keep saying disposable. Disposal of magical creatures.
You'll find out. about more about how that works.
They gotta have some form of court.
I believe you find this book kind of actually gets into that a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Like how people get sentenced to Azkaban, like what's the process of that? Like I think you'll find some of that out in this book.
Oh, okay.
We didn't talk about it in the last chapter, and I just wanted to bring it up real quick. When Malfoy, that article that Malfoy showed, Ron, Rita Skeeter wrote that.
Oh, yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out there. Rita Skeeter. Arnold Weasley.
I know. That could be any other Weasley, then. Got the name wrong.
Yeah.
How do you know it was
Arthur.
Ron's dad?
Right. What if it's his cousin or something? I don't know.
Making assumptions, Malfoy.
She just keeps coming back with articles about the Ministry. Rita Skeeter. Anyway, we didn't touch on that last time. Sorry. Which curse do you think is the worst?
The
The Cruciatus.
Cruciatus, thank you.
The torture curse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, you're just in extreme pain. At the zenith of pain scales all over. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like, even with, like, a hot poker, you know? Sooner or later, it's going to cool down. They're going to have to take it off. You may get a moment's relief. But with this, it's just constant.
Yep.
Or, you know, waterboarding. Sooner or later, they got to let you up for air.
Do they, though?
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Either way, what I'm saying is, most tortures, there's an end point.
Yeah.
Or there's a slight relief.
Well, I think...
Not saying that any torture is better than the other.
Well, I think with Cruciatus curse, I would think that if you're going to use this curse on someone, you're using it probably to try and get information out of somebody.
Well, yeah.
Probably. So
or you just really, really don't like them.
Right. If you're using the curse for a purpose, other than, like, I'm a sicko and I just want to have fun with this, I would assume that most of the time it's being implemented because someone wants information out of somebody or wants somebody to do something. Right? Like, you're going to tell me where the blah, blah, blah is, or I'm going to just not stop doing this. So I'm assuming that they stop to see if they'll answer the question and then keep going.
Or are they just like, I'll stop when you tell me?
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. The Imperious Curse is like, that's messed up on another level too, though, but
yeah.
Just, that's dangerous in a different way. Like, I'm going to control everything this person does.
I know that's a real thing, though. There's some drug that's manufactured that makes you more impressionable to people's suggestions.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
It's from some plant in South America.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Where it makes you extremely suggestive to
other people's whims.
Yeah.
And they can basically order you around and you just do it.
Yeah.
Which is really scary when you think that that's a real thing that could happen.
Yeah, like the Imperious Curse is actually kind of a real thing.
Yeah.
Not to the...
Not to the extent, but...
I thought it was interesting that Moody also noted, too, that, like, if you guys all pointed your wand at me right now instead of Vada Kedavra, like, I wouldn't even get a nosebleed.
Well, I don't know. Harry Potter's there. I mean, and what we've seen, he's still a very powerful wizard. I wouldn't chance that.
But I think what Moody is saying is, like...
You have to be very powerful in order for this to...
Work.
Yes,
you have to mean it.
Yeah.
You have to be...
You have to want to kill that person.
Yeah, you have to really very much want that person to be dead.
Yeah.
And be obviously magically skilled enough to do it, but you have to have enough...
Which really brings the big question of this chapter. Why did Mad-Eye Moody want to kill that spider then? What did that spider ever do to him?
I think it's definitely harder to kill another human being than it is to kill a spider.
Yes, I know. I was making a joke.
Oh, well, sometimes it's hard because you're like, sometimes you ask these very nitpicky questions that are good questions, but sometimes, like, you're serious in your questions, so.
No, I would assume that, I mean, if I was going to answer the question, he truly wanted to kill the spider in order to demonstrate to the class how it works.
Well, yeah.
So he
Kill the
did
spider.
want to kill that spider. So yeah, there you go. Now, are there any other killing curses? Or is it like, that's the curse? Or is that like the most powerful curse?
That is the curse whose purpose is to kill you.
Okay, so there are no other curses that...
Are killing curses?
Yeah.
No.
That could kill you?
There are curses that could kill you as far as, like, a byproduct of...
Well, yeah.
But no, there's...
Like, if Mad-Eye Moody had turned Malfoy into a fish, I'm figuring that he could have,
died.
suffocated. Yeah.
Right. I also think if you said use the Cruciatus curse and tortured someone long enough, you could maybe kill them.
Could you, though?
Well, I don't know.
Because it's not inflicting physical damage to you. It's just telling your pain sensors that
you're in agony.
This hurts.
Alright, maybe not the Cruciatus curse. Maybe you could definitely do it with the Imperious curse. I think there's other curses that, like, there are other curses that you can use that if you damage someone's body enough, you could die.
Yeah.
But there's no, like, other curse that you pointed at someone, die. That's the one.
The Cruciatus curse kind of reminds me of the Irukandji jellyfish. How you get stung by it, and then your entire body is just in agony for, like, the next week.
Yeah. Ugh.
It's not going to kill you. Well, usually it won't. I'm not going to say that it won't kill you, because I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably has killed people.
I'm no biologist.
To a degree, he's right. How can you fight what you've never, like, if you've never seen this and you don't really know what it is firsthand, the first time you see it, how are you going to respond to it effectively?
Yeah.
Like, what if you see someone do that and you're just like, and then you're like scared shitless because, oh my god.
Yeah.
I don't think Moody is wrong in showing them that.
Exactly. You can explain fighting techniques to someone, but until they actually fight someone,
they're not
gonna be able to fight.
Right.
It's like, I'm gonna teach you all these Brazilian jiu-jitsu tactics and ways to defend yourself, but then you've never been hit, so you're afraid to get hit.
Right. Very interesting. It seems that this year they have a competent teacher.
I know, 2 years in a row. And he's friends with Lupin.
Yeah, they mentioned Professor Lupin, so
And he knows Snape. We learned in the last chapter.
And they also made it a point to say that Snape seems a little wary of him and kind of like...
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Not a fan. Snape's not a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you like that.
Oh, yeah. Now, is that because of past school events, or is he just that much of a badass in his profession that they're kind of like, I don't want anything to do with this guy. This guy, like, fights off dark wizards for a living. Like, I can't do anything to him that he couldn't turn me into a toad for.
Not gonna comment on why Snape is acting the way he is.
I'm leaning more towards the whole badass factor.
Snape's just like nervous about him in general. Just as a rule, he's just like, he could mess me up.
Well, because
I don't want him to turn me into a ferret for being mean to Longbottom.
Because he also doesn't seem to have a problem with Lucius, which kind of leads me to believe that Lucius is kind of standoff with him as well. Because with Malfoy, he was like, my father. And
Oh.
he was just like, you tell your father.
Oh,
I'm not putting up with this.
He does not. Moody gives 0.
Yeah.
Does not care. He doesn't care.
That's what I mean. And everyone seems to care when Lucius is involved, except him. And Lucius didn't go to school with Harry's father, Snape, and everyone. Or he graduated a few years before.
They were all at school together at one point, but Lucius was a couple of years ahead of them.
There you go.
So he
was Moody in Lucius's grade, and he just happened to know Snape and them as younger students.
I think... No, Moody's, like, older.
Oh, even older than Lucius?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, he has gray, grizzled hair. I'm pretty sure... And Moody is, like, retired. So I feel like Moody is, like, in his 60s.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Moody is kind of like an old man. Like an old man, but I feel like he is an older dude.
I keep forgetting that Lupin and Harry's father and all them are just in their early 30s.
I know. The time thing is hard to keep track of in these. For me, the time...
So maybe was Moody the dark arts teacher at one point there? Like,
no, he's always been an Auror.
He has?
Yeah, he's always been an Auror for the Ministry. That's always, like, been his job.
Did Moody have, like, something going on with Lucius when Lucius was backing Voldemort back in the day?
I was just gonna say, maybe if you follow the theory that Lucius was a Voldemort supporter, maybe him and Moody, like, bumped heads a little bit back in the day.
I don't think it's a theory. They say it's fact. The theory is that he still supports him, which is basically a fact.
So maybe back in the day, Moody, like, bumped heads with Lucius.
Yeah, that's
maybe
what I mean.
That's the problem. Yeah, it could be. Maybe he's just like...
Maybe he knows some stuff, and Lucius is like, I really don't want to make him angry.
And maybe he's telling Draco, like, yeah, go tell your dad. Go tell your dad. I'd love to see him sometime. Sure. Let's do this.
And Dumbledore is just the same way this year.
What?
Dumbledore just doesn't care.
No, and Dumbledore's allowing him to do these things, you know.
Dumbledore, like, doesn't care because he's caring too much.
Well, yeah, I think Dumbledore knows, like,
yeah.
Kids need to be prepared. Like, kids need to know.
I don't care what they say, show them whatever you got.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's already been established in this class that Moody is going to put them under the Imperious Curse to try and teach them how to fight it off.
Yeah.
So he is going to do unforgivable curses on kids.
Mm-hmm.
In order to try to teach them how to fight that.
Yeah. That's actually something I was going to get at. Is he going to do it to the kids? Or is he going to have, like, Snape come in and put the spell on Snape and say, all right, now you have to break the curse off of him?
No, I think he says in the chapter... Hang on, let me check, because I'm pretty sure he says in the chapter... Oh, it just says the Imperious Curse can be fought, and I'll be teaching you how, but it takes real strength of character, and not everyone has it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it doesn't necessarily say that he is going to put it on kids. That was just my assumption.
Because something tells me that wouldn't be okay.
Yeah, and Sirius is coming back, and Harry's all pissed off about it.
I know.
Also, he was a little mean to Hedwig. I know he's upset, but, like...
I just flew to the Bahamas for you.
Right, how far did Hedwig go? She was gone a long time. He was worried about if something happened to her, and as soon as she comes back, he's just like, go to the Owlery if you want treats. Get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was mean. She had a right to be mad.
Oh, yeah.
If it were me, I'd be like, oh my god, Hedwig, you're okay. Thank God. He didn't even care. He's just like, I need my letter from Sirius.
I mean, I could understand that, but he was also very angry.
Yes.
And Hedwig, you know, got him back a little bit, a little
She-
sass.
Yeah, she did smack him in the face with her wings. She did.
The Hedwig sass.
She showed him, hey, that was rude. I don't know. I don't blame Hedwig. That was a long journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really long journey for her. You know, Sirius is coming back anyway. She could have just hopped a ride on...
Buckbeak.
Yeah. But I guess she wanted to get there ahead of Sirius.
Well, maybe
Sirius
Sirius
wanted the player to get ahead.
Well, maybe, you know, he sent the letter because when he sent the letter, maybe Sirius hadn't, like, left yet. Because he's a wanted man, and Buckbeak is a wanted hippogriff, so they gotta, like, figure out... If they're coming back north to Britain to be that close, he's gotta, like, plan that to make sure he's like,
it's
okay.
gotta be super low-key.
Right, I gotta
And how
make
do
sure
you-
I can...
How do you do that? You're wanted by the wizards, but at the same time, you can't let any muggles see you flying a big hippogriff.
Right.
So that's gotta be hard.
So how, you know, he's gotta only fly on, like, cloudy nights...
Mhm.
or something. You know, it's not like he has an invisibility cloak or... I mean, he just escaped Azkaban, so I'm assuming he doesn't have a wand.
Maybe.
Or maybe,
Maybe he's gotten
maybe,
one.
Maybe
It's been a
he-
while.
Yeah, maybe he did get one. Or does Buckbeak fly overhead and he, like, you know, turns into his dog form and just goes,
Maybe a little bit of both.
you know? But I feel like either way, it's got to be carefully planned how he
Oh, yeah.
travels. So I'm not surprised Hedwig got there first.
Yeah, that's true.
Poor Hedwig.
Okay.
All right.
Well, on to the next chapter.
On to the next chapter. Join us next time for chapter 15. Chapter 15, Beaubaton and Durmstrang.